Hey, Steve.
Hi, Rachel. How are you?
I'm so good. Thanks so much for joining me. My name's Rachel Martin. Thanks all for joining us today. I'm the owner and vintner of Oceana Wines. We are artists, and that's how we approach winemaking. So when I work with artists, it's a homage to my beginnings. And that's why we're interested in supporting artists like Steve Shook. Steve Shook, thanks so much. It's a pleasure to finally meet you.
Well, thanks for having me.
Steve Shook is would you call yourself a silkscreen artist?
I do call myself a silkscreen artist. At this point, I'm kind of a sort of a general print artist because I'm exploring a few different mediums, but silkscreen is definitely the one that is nearest and dearest to my heart. One that I love.
Yeah, I only, we only just met, I guess last year, maybe around July or something. I bought my first print from you, or maybe it was in 2019. I'm totally not sure because 2020 is a vacuous black pit. But this is the first print that I bought from you, and I'm the proud owner of two more prints. They're all in my studio. My broadcast studio, which is also here is coupling during the pandemic as my bedroom. So
that's my home office too. Got like a 4-foot commute to work from my bed to my desk.
Very convenient. Lots of work gets done. I'm sure. So I was so taken by your work because of my background and my life, as a human being. And when I was younger, I was really into the punk rock scene, and I was living in Vienna, Virginia. My family, we moved from Southern California, from Huntington Beach to Vienna, Virginia. And it was a little bit of a tough move for me, I'm sure you could imagine. It was like my brother actually brought his surfboard, on the trip, and it's the first snow. We had like a huge snow. I think it was 1984, a huge snow, and we flipped his surfboard over and sledded down the hill.
Sure.
And so
You got to be versatile on the East Coast,
Yeah, and I know that you have an affinity for surfing too, right?
I do, and I've been to Huntington Beach. That's where the OP Pro Classic was always held. So it was a little bit of culture shock, I'm sure, between Huntington Beach and Vienna, Virginia.
Yeah, totally. It super was, and I guess one of my outlets for that was the punk rock scene.
It was
I know you were. And I started I was living in Vienna, and I was 9th grade, but my friends I had made had cars, they were older than me, and we would go to see shows. Vienna is only 12 miles from DC or less.
Sure, right.
So I would go to the 930 Club, which is another print that I have. And, I guess we went to all ages shows, or maybe I had a fake ID. I'm not sure.
There were a lot of all ages show, which was, I got into it when I was in high school as well. And, it was because of that, the time and the place was pretty welcoming for kids. And if not, I think the drinking age was 18 until 1986 or so. So, you could squeak by if you needed to.
Yeah, exactly. And I was wondering, I mean, we never met back then, which is not a total surprise because I was so young and I was totally intimidated by everything. And so I just kind of stuck by the people that I knew.
Sure.
So in those times, in the 80s, were you doing posters and stuff for shows? how did you get into a formal scenario with your art?
Now, to go back in high school, I was I didn't really do much by way of like art. I was skateboarding all the time. I was going to shows or I was skateboarding, and I think through osmosis, the skateboard art, like on the bottom of the decks, always kind of sort of resonated with me, and I guess it never really left. And then fast forward into many, many years later in life, and well, I'm still a skateboarder, but I kind of started revisiting like what was it about these boards that was so cool, and it was the graphics. And the graphics then were applied, by hand via many layers of silkscreen ink, and these labors of love put on things that were meant to basically be destroyed. It was something really kind of beautiful about that. So later in life, I started collecting skateboards, old ones from the 80s, and just kind of like sort of deconstructing them with my eyes. Like, how did this image get onto this board? And, how can I do that? I've been doing graphic design work for many, many years prior. And so finally, I took a one-day silkscreen class in Baltimore at this little print studio, and I was like, oh, this is what I want to do. This resonates with me. So it's been a couple years. The print that's right behind you, that for posers, that was actually the first design that I did. I created that design.
That's awesome.
That's a couple versions into it, but the very first silkscreen print that I made, completely designed and did by hand, was that design there. I think I made like 14 that actually turned out decent, and probably had about 30 that did not. And they're sitting in a closet someplace. But it was a great way to kind of like kick it off. And through Facebook, I saw that posers had like a pretty active nostalgia group online, and I guess they do like a kind of a reunion party every year. So I made a little one product web shop and posted the link there and say, hey, if anyone thinks this is cool, have at it. And sold out pretty quickly. It sold out like within like a couple hours, and and so that's kind of that's an endorphin rush. So I kept with it.
That's sweet. So did you? So Posers was your first, and then so you're from the DC metro area, correct?
Yeah, I was actually born in DC and grew up just right outside of it, between Annapolis and DC.
So then, did your works thereafter represent your travels or where you moved? Because you have some here. Let me show everybody a couple of these images. So these are the DC images, and Commander Salamander I have as well. That's where I bought all of my hair dye.
Sure.
Yeah. So was Commanders like a thing for you as well?
Yeah, it's kind of later in life that I, came to grips with admitting it, because, back in the day, like those of us in the hardcore punk scene kind of laughed at people who spent like, $100 on a t-shirt at Commander Salamander. But the dirty little secret was we all shopped there. So, later in life, I came clean and decided to give a little homage to Commander Salamander, because I bought stuff there.
Of course. And I so love like those people. So tell me about the characters in that print.
Yeah, they the Commander Salamander folk kind of developed like a whole kind of stable of characters. I know like the one in the middle, the girl, she was like Bonnie Barbell, and the other names I can't remember.
Right.
But my sister and I, like, we had like all like the free buttons that had these characters. Worked at a surf shop that for some reason was selling Commander Salamander t-shirts. So
cool. And DC Space is where I went also.
Oh, yeah.
DC Space was such an incredible, it was like a mix of different styles of art, whether it be spoken word or
a lot of jazz.
Jazz, right.
Yep, big jazz club.
Right. And then also like punk or experimental music. A lot of my friends in high school's bands would perform there. And so, and it of course is no longer in existence. Neither is Posers. And is Commanders still standing?
Well, the buildings for all of them are still standing.
Yeah.
Commander Salamander, I think, probably went out of business maybe like 10 years ago. I think they finally threw in the towel. The woman who owned it has a kind of a vintage retro store a couple doors down, so she's still in the mix.
Cool. That's cool.
DC Space was a Starbucks until COVID took it out. Yeah, now I think it's just sitting vacant, and Posers is now a running shop.
Yeah, it's been a few things, right?
Sure. It was actually a really cool club after Posers. It was called like Mountain Lodge number something.
I must have been living in a different city at that time.
Yeah, it was a blip on the radar.
Yeah, but DC Space is just like so iconic, and
that was my favorite out of all of them.
Yeah. And then also Posers was super iconic too. Did it close earlier than DC Space? I tend to think so.
I think it did. I remember DC Space was still in existence in the mid 90s, and I think Posers had shut their doors before that.
Yeah, it was like, living in Virginia and Vienna, it was always like all my friends' older brothers like would go there and they would get their hair all whatever to like go dance, and we were never allowed to like join, and because we were just, I guess, like too lame, too young. But I was there at DC Space, and I was there at 930 Club, and we would fake our stamps and everything.
You'd find someone who actually paid. You would lick your hand and like get their stamp, and half the time you'd get found out, and 930 bouncers weren't real cool about that.
Yeah, I mean, like the best times. And then I moved to Boston, and I went to the Museum School of Fine Arts there, and that's how I started my world in the arts. But these are, obviously CBGB in the center, that's New York City, but the Middle East and Rathskeller. And so I kind of felt like it was, looking at your website, which is steveshook.net, I saw a little bit of my own path, like in my own life, represented in your work. Can you tell us about these pieces?
Yeah, so I ended up moving up to Boston probably in the early 90s. And at that point, I'd been living in Baltimore and, going to a lot of shows in DC. And at that point, the clubs in Baltimore and DC seemed to be like kind of stagnating and shutting down. And the scene, that as I knew it, seemed like it was kind of at a low ebb. I moved up to Boston, and all of a sudden there's like a million different clubs that are all brand new to me, and they all have their own flavor and vibe. And I was just in heaven. I'd found Nirvana, everything from like the smallest little hole in the wall, jazz closet, to like, the Rathskeller or the Rat, which was basically Boston CBGBs. It was filthy, it was stinky, it was dirty, it was a little druggy, and but it was awesome.
Yeah, I went there. I saw a bunch of shows there. Yeah, and that was, of course, in the Fenway, near Fenway Park.
Yeah, that was right there in Kenmore Square.
Yeah, and then of course we all know CBGBs, and I went to CBGBs when I was a kid, and I suppose you did as well.
Yeah, you got to give homage to CBGB. I mean, it's lived a million different lives, and it basically begat like everything. It was kind of ground zero from everything I ended up like holding sacred in my life. Nice. I mean, for me, the Ramones is ground zero for everything. So, I had to do a little tribute to CBGB.
So when you go on your website, you have different cities as well. I mean, you have Delaware, right? And so can you kind of describe and explain all the different cities, why the cities, and are they all music venues, or or what?
I'd
And
say
there's also a surf kind of thing going on too. So please explain.
Yeah, for sure. Well, obviously being in the Mid-Atlantic, I traveled around a lot. I mean, within a few hours of DC, you could get to, Baltimore, Philly, Pittsburgh was close by where I went to college in Morgantown, West Virginia. We had a great club in Morgantown, West Virginia called the Underground Railroad. So I'd done a print for them. I played in bands, to some extent growing up. My brothers were in bands, my friends were in bands. So, we would kind of all like sort of tour around and, support each other. So you got to see like some, sort of farther flung locales. So, the Newark, Delaware one, that was very close by. My wife's from the Newark, Delaware area. So we're there pretty often. If a place has like some sort of emotional resonance to me, I'll, look for, well, what kind of icon from this area can I represent in a print? And, some of them were kind of one-off. So I did the Continental Club in Austin, Texas, which is probably one of the best music venues in the country. The 40 Watt Club down in Athens, Georgia, which, gave us the B-52s and REM and Pylon. I guess during COVID, I also, instead of just looking to see like what we've lost and what's way off in the rearview mirror now, it gave me pause to kind of stop and think, well, what's still here? And so like clubs like the Black Cat in DC is still here, like the 40 Watt in Athens, Continental Club, they're all still here. So for those
very impressive too, for the Black Cat still be around on 14th Street is incredible.
They're all hurting right now for sure. Arlene's Grocery right up there in the Lower East Side. They're still trying to keep the lights on. So basically for those clubs, you can see details on my website. I'm doing like a donation portion of those prints to whatever GoFundMe sites that they have set up for their employees.
Well, that's awesome.
Yeah, that's worked out pretty well. The Black Cat one's like done really, really well for their employees donation fund. The Continental Club's done well. The Arlene's Grocery up in Manhattan has done well.
Do we know when those clubs are going to reopen?
Nah, I heard your state California is opening up though in I think June.
Oh my gosh!
That on CNN today that they're going to go fully open.
Wow.
So who knows? Like live music is already starting to kind of creep back a little bit here in the DC area. So it's kind of hard to say. I mean, there are a lot of artists have really kind of poured their hearts out for these clubs. Arlene's and Black Cat, they're all doing like live stream concerts as a way to make money right now. So
I hear that. Yeah.
Yep. I play in a band as well, so I'm looking.
What's your band? Tell me your band.
We're called The Buzz.
The Buzz.
Yeah, cool. We're a DC-based power pop band. We got to play one last show in Silver Spring last March before everything shut down.
Oh, what venue?
It was actually the BFW in Silver Spring.
Nice.
They do like apparently, well, they were doing like every first Saturday was like 4 garage rock bands, and it was like really like the greatest scene. And finally got to play it, and then the world went dark.
Yeah. We Michael Scruggs. Do you know Michael? He's commenting. Sorry, you can't see the comments, but he said he's going to be ordering artwork for his steakhouse. He opened up a steakhouse around Culpeper, Virginia.
Okay.
And P.S. he says, I'm DJing the Posers reunion at DC9.
Excellent. They awesome. Missed it last year.
Yeah. Right? Michael, when is that reunion? Is there a date? And someone else is asking if you've designed a wine label before.
I've designed a winery poster for this little label called Oceano.
Yeah. Hey, that's an amazing segue. Let's show everybody that sweet. Yeah. And so we did this. Sorry, everyone. It's a screenshot. It's not the original work. So understand that. But this was a little bit of a collab. I took a photo.
Totally a collab.
Yeah, a little bit. I took a photo at the beach at Pismo Beach. This is part of the pier, and it was like, I don't know. I just really loved the pic, and my desire is to collaborate always. So when I reached, and I'm a customer, so what the heck, right? But when I reached out to Steve, this was my idea because it reminded me a lot of poster art, the photograph itself, and you just made it a whole lot better than it was originally. So can you talk a little bit about, the process for this collab?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, first off, the wine bottles themselves are beautiful. I mean, they're kind of works of art, like in and of themselves. And my roots culture is definitely surfing. And I've got family members like on the California coast from like north to south. So I know these areas, and when you mentioned Pismo Beach and showed me the Pismo Beach like pier, I was like, oh wow, this is what I want to do. And in my mind, I kind of harkened me back to like sort of like the '70s, sort of like Hang 10 vibe, where everything was a little bit kind of like muted pastel and kind of a little surfy, washed out. That's kind of what I went for with this one here.
Yeah. I love it. There are those old timey posters of kind of like that California surf lifestyle, or, from the '70s. And just, Pismo Beach is really close to where our vineyard is. It's about 1.5 miles away from Spanish Springs Vineyard. And then the neighboring, adjacent to Pismo is Oceano Beach. And so that's where the name of our wine came from is original Five City, but as is Pismo Beach as well. But that the sunset, by the way, that's Steve's addition to the image. The sunset wasn't there, but it picked up the vibe like perfectly. And then you added like a little bit of like surf to the water, right? You added some waves.
Yeah. I mean, I just kind of sort of went with it. There was also in my mind, and this probably doesn't come through in the image itself, but like, I'm a big Andy Warhol fan, and kind of like, his later years, he, really embraced going back to like doing like ads for, products, like Apple and Volkswagen. And, he did them for Absolute Vodka. And that's like some of my favorite stuff that he did in his later years. And for some reason, I kind of had that in my head as I was designing this one here. Like,
love it.
It's not and no one's going to accuse me of ripping Andy Warhol's style off, but like, but it was in my head, like, like these beautiful bottles should be, front and center, and, speak for the brand.
Yeah. Thanks, Steve. I appreciate that so much. So, can we talk a little bit about moving from the actual physical silkscreen process to your new adapted printing process?
Yeah, sure. So, I was fortunate enough to have a silkscreen studio right nearby, me here in Annapolis. It was at a community college, which is great. It's, state of the art, has everything you could possibly want. But when COVID hit it, the print studio is the first thing that shut down over there. And as far as I know, it's still shut down. So at first it was access to, my materials and the environment I need to screen, because there's a whole lot of equipment that goes along with it. Power washers and these big machines that burn the screens, and you have inks and squeegees everywhere, and enough room to make a mess. So long story short, I've been doing like a smaller line of like GClay prints for businesses at the beach. They'd have larger orders, which would be harder to fill by hand. So I did a little experimentation with different commercial printing methods, and the GClay method is basically mimics silk screening. You see like the the heavy layers of like ink. It layers them The colors are very vibrant. They sit on archival paper really, really nicely. They're pricey, but they're worth the cost, I think. If you basically what you get is a perfect reproduction every time with GClay. So for my larger runs of prints, I'm offering them as GClay. So far, everyone's been very happy with them. For smaller, limited runs of prints, I'm still doing them by hand.
And so, how is the creation of the art? Does it differ going from Silkscreen to GClay? Meaning, like the program in which you use, or how is it done?
I still do everything in Photoshop as far as like coming up with the color layer files. In silkscreening, you layer color upon color, basically going from the lightest color of your design all the way through black. And then once the black layer's on you, usually that's when the image all kind of like sort of comes together. I design my GClay prints in pretty much the same way. I kind of use a reduced color palette, kind of, less is more kind of thing, and it's nice kind of working within the constraint. I don't have to work within the constraints with GClay since it's using an inkjet printer, but I like the look of it, so I still prepare the files in the same way.
Yeah, I like the look of it too. I actually took silk screening classes when I was when I was at museum school.
I'm not telling you anything new.
No, it's okay. And then that was like before computerization.
Oh yeah.
So I was actually, burning screens and doing the whole thing and layering. Yep. And it's for anyone that loves process, it's definitely rewarding.
Yep.
And the result is, their original works, like every single one of them.
Oh yeah, each one will come out just a little bit different, and with the silkscreen, you love each one because of its differences.
And they're never like perfect. They can't be.
No, they can't be. Just registering like one color layer to sit on top of the other, and then the more layers you add on, the harder that registration goes. And like it's so easy for you to get to like the fourth or fifth layer of ink, then all of a sudden you realize you screwed something up like on step 3, and then you're like, oh yeah.
So like there's something about being less precise, so to speak, or there's a beauty in imprecision.
There is, but I think the beauty lies in you trying to get it as close to precise as you can. It's the human factor which leads to the imperfections. That's kind of like where the beauty is. It's like you're not trying to be sloppy, but when you see like a little slip of a something, like your eye catches it, and that's its beauty mark or something.
But it's not just with silkscreen; it's with anything that's handmade.
Yep. That's true. That's definitely true. But actually, right here, I have like an example of like this is a reissue skateboard from from the 80s. It's actually a company that's based out of Ocean City, Maryland. But this one here is like I believe like 14 different layers silkscreen on top of each other to get like the fades and everything.
It's so incredible.
Yeah, like when you're a kid, you're like, oh, that's a rad looking board, and then when you're older, you realize, oh my god, like someone really painstakingly put a lot into making that art. And it's funny, no one appreciated it back then, but there's a whole culture that appreciates it now.
For sure. It's like since everything's so digital, like high touch means so much.
Yeah, it does. That's kind of like what people are looking for now. I mean, you saw it. I mean, with Etsy. I mean, when Etsy first started, I don't have an Etsy shop, but I always was fascinated by like these are people like putting themselves out there, like making things by hand that may or may not be technically precise, but there's something lovable about. You can see the picture of the guy who made it, and some hippie dude in Vermont. And you're like, cool. Made by a man,
Yeah, exactly. Well, and that's our approach to wine is like the handmade aspect. And of course you can purchase wine where it's going to taste the same every vintage, it's like machine made type of stuff. And our wines are handmade. And, every vintage is going to be different, because that's the beauty of wine. It's not just, our winemaker Marbu. There's also the weather. It always changes, and then the vines get older, or eventually, there's some change to the geology because of the age, or whatever you want to say. The rainfall, or maybe eventually erosion. We're so close to the ocean, that's how we approach wine. And I know I have to send you. I have a glass of wine. Steve, do you drink wine?
I do drink wine.
You? Oh man,
I do.
I
sure.
gotta send you a couple bottles. What's your favorite?
Please do. My wife definitely likes the Chardonnays and the lighter wines. Actually, she likes them both. She's Italian, so she was the one who kind of introduced me into it, the culture of red wine, which is sort of like that's my lane. But
well, we make Pinot Noir as well, so it seems like you're going to have a box set.
Oh, please.
Sent to you. So, what is the art behind you right now?
That is a banner for Quicksilver, surf brand. I'm sitting in the man cave / music room here, so there's just guitars and skateboards and surf banners, kind of everywhere.
That's awesome. So what's on the horizon for you and your art, and what do you see coming in 2021?
I've gotten some commission work. Obviously I did the piece for you, which I'm very, very pleased with. From there, I had a nice radio interview with a station up in Boston a couple weeks ago, and from that, I've gotten kind of a nice stream of communication from folks who have suggested other Boston venues they'd like to see. So the thing about Boston, there was never any shortage of subject material for Boston venues. But I'm kind of branching out a little bit. I did a print recently that'll be available soon for a skateboard company called Toxic / Brand X. They're originally out of Ocean City, but I think they're operating out of Oceanside, California now.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so another bi-coastal company. You know all about that?
I know all about it, yeah.
You know all about it. I'm actually doing a really kind of sweet one right now for a bakery in Newark, Delaware that's celebrating its 150th anniversary. So
awesome.
They saw some of the other prints that I've done for Delaware groups, and
it seems like any artisan would be interested in the style of work that you produce.
Yeah, I kind of it's sort of pop art, is a little impressionistic. It's even my digital prints aren't precise. I mean, you can look at them and you can see that there was a hand involved there. Like those lines aren't those lines weren't made by a machine. So if that connects with you, then good.
Totally, and better for that, right?
Good for me, right?
Yeah. Have you ever designed snowboards? Art for snowboards?
I have not. A friend of mine actually worked for Burton, and he did design some snowboard art.
That might be cool.
Yeah, I've actually got my very first snowboard on the wall right here next to me from 1984. Let's see, right there. Yep, that was my very first. I used to build them before that, like every other kid, you try to warp some plywood and make it yourself. But that was my first actual one.
Yeah, well, that was a question from someone that's watching. And you've never done a wine label. You're like, no, Rachel, maybe I should.
Maybe I should do a wine label. If only I knew someone who had a winery.
Exactly. And then also, we haven't really talked about this, but we're purchasing a VW bus that will be, acting as our mobile tasting room. So I'd love to talk to you about maybe doing some designs for the bus.
I would love to do that. That would be right in my wheelhouse.
Yeah, endless summer, you know.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. So, well, thanks, Steve, for coming on and hanging out with me, and thanks to everyone for joining. Steve, do you want to end with anything or plug anything?
No, I just want to say, you know, thanks for having me on here. Thanks for giving me a shot with doing a poster for you.
It's amazing.
Want to tell everyone to seek out the Oceano wines. I haven't been able to find it right here in my own neighborhood just yet, but I did see on your site that you do have a distributor in the Mid-Atlantic. So
we do.
Okay.
Yeah, you just have to like ask your, you know, your wine shop to carry the wine. You know what I'm saying? And if you need any help with that, you know, just ask me, because more people who have access to our wines, the better, right?
No, for sure.
Yeah. What town are you in?
I'm in Annapolis.
Oh, yeah.
So we have wine shops galore. So, and I actually have I know some of the purveyors, so I will.
Sweet. You know. Well, I'll send you some wine first.
Okay.
And then you can tell them all how good it tastes.
That would be fun. I'm sure I wouldn't be lying either. So cool.
Right on. Well, Steve, take good care. We're obviously staying in touch, and we'll talk more about the VW bus.
Awesome. Cool.
See you
Thanks,
later,
Rachel.
everyone. Bye.